welcome to a special Patreon edition of Pete vs. Anxiety, the mental health podcast breaking the stigma that mental health is talked about enough today. My guest today is the visionary author of 3 life-changing books, including The Emotional School, The Looming Mental Health Crisis, and a Path Through It. Please welcome the inspiring Leroy Slanzi. Is that how you say your last name?
Yeah, you nailed it, man.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
got it.
Thanks for
Nice. On
having
the
me.
first try, too.
Yeah, no, a lot of people mess up. They sometimes mess up Leroy, which is another interesting thing, but that's okay.
it's like it's Leroy. It's not hard to read, guys. Come on now.
Yeah, I know. You'd be surprised. Or they break into bad Leroy Brown. That's the other piece that comes with it. So I get it all, man. I get it all.
So how you doing today?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm doing awesome, actually. Like I said, I was excited when I saw this, and I you approached me about it, and I was like, oh yeah, let's go for it. I love this. So why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself? Give them a little background and let them know where you're at exactly.
Sure. Well, as we just alluded to, my name's Leroy Slanzi. I'm up here in Canada on the West Coast.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been in education for about 25 years. I started off working in a behavior classroom where back in the day they used to stream kids into one spot if they weren't functioning well in a classroom. So I stepped right into dealing with kids who struggled social, emotionally, academically. From there, I went on to be a special ed teacher, and I did that for about 3 or 4 years at a high school. And then ever since, probably the last 18, 19 years, I've been a school administrator, and I've been a principal in elementary, middle, and secondary school. I'm a dad. That's the most important one. I have an 18-year-old son who's in his first year of college, and I have a daughter who's sleeping upstairs and has no idea I have a podcast, so she interrupts. And as you know, you hear the beast because somebody woke her up. That would be my little girl. She's 16, and so that's me in a nutshell. And right now, I'm currently a principal of an elementary school, and I've written 3 books, and I'm out all the time working with schools and teachers and trying to help school districts out and find a path.
Yeah, that's awesome. So emotional schools, how did you even come across doing that one? Is that just from your all your experience of being in the different areas of things like that?
Yeah, essentially I'm fortunate enough to have been in education now through, I'm a Gen Xer, so I was born in the 70s, and, I grew up a certain way as a kid. And,
yeah,
I got into teaching 25 years ago or so. And, I've seen a massive shift in children and how they're being raised, not only by their parents, but by society. I've also seen a shift in, the era that they lived in or are living in compared to what we live in, right? We lived in a time where we had no technology. We didn't have those influences. And, we scraped a knee. We had to get up because, if we were riding our bikes, our parents were 45 minutes away sometimes. Whereas our kids, they live in a world where there's instant contact, instant communication, instant help. And, they're constantly being inundated by social media and all these other things that we didn't have. And so, growing up, we had to learn how to persevere, show some grit, be resilient. And our kids don't have the same toolkit because they don't have to be. And what I've found in the last 25 years is this slow progression from, kids who are mentally stronger to kids who are now not as strong in terms of their mental capacities to cope, right? And so, I started to really see it hit home about 10 or so years ago with behavior in classrooms, and it's shifted drastically. Like, 25 years ago, we'd have 1 or 2 kids, there'd be a class clown in every class, and another kid who couldn't handle his emotions. Now it's 5, 6, 7 kids, and it's incredibly disruptive for teachers. It's hard to teach. Kids are struggling, parents are struggling. And so, I had to jump on and really let the world know that there is a crisis happening in our schools. There's a crisis happening with our kids. And their ability to cope is now being infused with external sources that we just don't need them to be influenced by. And so the book is really about identifying what's going on in our schools, what's going on for our kids, what's going on for our families, and what we need to do about it so we don't end up with tragedies on our hand. And I mean, you live in the United States, and you guys have more school shootings than I
Oh
can
my god,
possibly imagine.
it's horrible here. It
Yeah.
makes no sense, man. Like it's just
Hmm.
senseless violence against these kids, and it's just insane that you have to talk about this stuff like Sandy Hook and all,
Yeah.
Hidalgo and all. It's just like it blows my mind because it's like what are we doing here, guys? Like we continue to let this happen. It's
Yeah.
like you're also worried about like TikTok is the main issue now, now as of right now, TikTok. Oh my God. Okay. I don't care about TikTok. Let's worry about these kids, man. Like what are we doing about this? It's crazy.
Yeah.
And
And you're nailing it, Pete.
And I can relate to exactly what you said. The one class clown and the kid that had the emotional. I was the kid, the emotional, and the class clown's the one that pushed me to the edge. And it was like I had an outburst, and then I looked like the bad guy because everybody, the kid was just pestering me completely. So I can relate to that completely. When you said that, I was like, man, that hit home because I know that feeling. I
Hmm.
was that kid who didn't know how to control my emotions and things like that because like I had moved around a lot when I was younger. My dad had
Yeah.
moved me to several different schools, and it was hard to make friends. And I finally got to a stable environment where I was there for the rest of high school. And there's that one guy, the class clown, that just keeps agitating, and
Hmm.
keeps going, thinks he's funny. And then it's like I have an outburst, and then I'm the one that looks like I'm the one that's crazy at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah. And, and that was pretty typical 20 years ago, 25 years ago. Now you times that by 5, right?
Yeah.
It's not just, we have the kid like you, Pete, who've gone from foster home to foster home, or have gone from grandparents to uncles to aunts, or to, or they've experienced some kind of, adverse experience as a child, and they are emotional. And, one thing that I can say that I'm pretty proud of with just this generation of kids, at least here in Canada, is bullying has plummeted.
Yeah.
We've done a lot of work since you and I were in school, because I'm guessing that you got bullied pretty bad, and
Mm-hmm.
and we didn't deal with it as much as well
Nope.
as we do now. And it's been 20 years of this bullying propaganda, anti-bullying propaganda, and it's working.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, we've seen, if you looked at a bar graph, bullying would be, if these were the bars, bullying would be the short one, and mental health is up here now.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening, is we're seeing more anxiety disorders, more mood disorders, more behavior disorders, you know just more of that stuff that's going on. And now we're seeing, kids struggling with their emotions times 5.
Yeah.
And schools aren't equipped to cope with it, right? And unless they have the right structures, which is what I do. I go and I work with teachers in school districts, and I help schools squeeze that water out of a rock to help all those kids, right?
Yeah. Yeah, especially with kids with emotional things, because it's hard to tell what to do in a lot of those situations, whether it be suicidal thoughts or
Hmm.
any of those kind of things. Like people don't know what to do, and I think that's the whole point of like this whole conversation for this podcast is just like it's not talked about enough. I don't care what anybody says; they're like, "Oh, it's not talked about enough." I don't care what you say; it's not talked about nearly enough. And then when you
Hmm.
get to certain topics, it's like, "Whoa, hold on, Pete." We're getting a little too serious for people. Like we were discussing about the one guest I had recently, with that whole incident, it was just like, you got to stay calm because because if you panic, you don't know what's going to happen next.
That's right.
And the unpredictability of the show alone is like the things that have happened and we're not even up to a full year of it yet. It's crazy because you don't know because these people are sharing their emotions of things they're dealing with. Like I had my first guest was a guy that had PTSD and he was over there um where was he? He's somewhere in Iraq and in Afghanistan, all that
Right.
kind of stuff. And he said he got his Humvee blew up, so he flipped it over. He was unconscious for like 15 minutes, and he woke up and he came back too. But when he came back, they were giving him a psychological test and said he was okay. And he's like, "No, I'm not okay. I'm telling you, I'm not okay." And the fact that they were just avoiding the whole subject, and this poor guy is struggling. It's scary because like if that's an adult, what are these poor kids having to deal with? And then the schools from my personal experience with my other daughter when she was getting bullied, it was like you're not getting enough. It's like you had to go in and like make a lot of noise and threaten to have like news
Hmm.
media come down there and to get them to do something or even answer your calls. And it's crazy. It's like come on now, man. It's like I get bullying happens, but we got to do a lot better because now you have the internet. Now you got cyberbullying. Now you get
Hmm.
these kids way more access to get to each other. Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok, even video games. You got on these video games now. These
Yeah.
kids saying the horrible things to each other. It's insane.
Yeah. And I don't want to be gender specific, but girls are very, very mean,
Oh
very
yeah.
mean. And you know,
Mm-hmm.
I've been in, I think, 3 high schools
Yeah.
and a middle school. And oftentimes when I have to deal with situations that involve conflict, you know, I'd have a stack this big of dealing with girl stuff, and guy stuff is way down here. And you know, with my own daughter, it started when she was in kindergarten. She wore a fuzzy sweater to school, and some girl decided to say she was, you know, she was stupid because she had a fuzzy, came home crying in kindergarten because of a fuzzy sweater that felt like her stuffy. And I was like, what the, this is happening already?
Yeah.
And, you know, and that was my, you know, and I'd been already in education for a little bit, but not in an elementary school at that point. But I was like, oh, wow, this has happened. The mean girl thing is happening now.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
you know,
Exactly.
and my daughter's 16, and you know, and she's not innocent. She's made some mean comments, but she's also
Yeah.
received it, right? But we have that conversation. Like when she gets, it's like, okay, now when you roll your eyes or you make a face, how do you
Yeah.
think, you know, that person feels when, because now you,
Exactly.
right? And so, but you know, I educate her at home, and the school is doing a better job of educating these
Yeah.
kids. And I think, and that's the biggest piece is, you know, and it's unfortunate down in the States, there's this backlash against, God, what did I watch the other day? Some group, Mothers Against Something, talking about social emotional learning, and they wanted it banned. And it's like, social emotional learning is about compassion, it's about empathy, it's about kindness. And what parent would not want their kid to have those character traits, right? And
Exactly.
I just thought, you know, and I don't want to bash on the United States and the burning of the books and all that stuff, but I just sometimes I shake my head when I think of these mothers who probably every single one of them experienced the mean girl, so
Mm-hmm.
they know, and they, you know, to get on a stage and demand it out of schools when you yourself were probably bullied by another girl, or you were that girl, right? Because
Exactly.
there's no girl who's exempt from it. There's not one. I don't care if you're the most popular girl in the school.
Yeah.
You're dealing with the mean girl stuff within your own circle. Whether or not you're mean to somebody else, you're experiencing it, right? And I just, that's one of the things that I do is I work with schools and school districts to implement, you know, social emotional learning programs right from kindergarten, even earlier if they have a Head Start program or a Strong Start program or whatever preschool program they have in their school. You can teach kids how to soothe their soul
Yeah.
very early, so at least they can take some deep breaths, manage those emotions, and then have enough strength mentally to work through those emotions, and then get this specified individual help they need, which then teaches them how to do that their whole life, right?
Yeah.
And that's the key, is to be able to hone in on that. And you know, the biggest fight, I think, you know, that I find is there's so much emphasis put on literacy and numeracy, and which is important because we need people to be able to read, write, and do basic arithmetic, but they can't get to it if they're too emotional, right?
Exactly.
And so it's like a cart before the horse scenario. And yeah, it's tough, man.
It's just it's just beyond rough now these days, man. It's just with everything going on and then all the parents getting involved. And it's like, I understand you're looking what's best for your kids, but let's look at it logically. It's like a lot of gang mentality happens too, because a lot of it's like one person starts it and then everybody else wants to be a part of it. And it's like, I think a lot of misinformation goes around. And I think that's the problem with social media. Because versus when we were in school, you only had AOL was your only access, and the internet was still brand new to everybody. You know,
Hmm.
AOL was pretty much your access to everything, unless you were doing something else. But that really much was your only connection. Now you have all these different social media sites, and everybody just throwing all this information out. And it's like the numerous things that you find on there is just it's mind boggling. It's like,
Yeah.
and then when you ask them for credentials, then you're the enemy because you're asking them to what's your credentials? Do you have any credentials that you're calling out, or are you just making factless space? Are you getting this
Yeah.
off Wikipedia? Is what I like to say to people. Are you getting this off
Yeah.
Wikipedia? Because Wikipedia is just people's opinions at that point. You know what I'm saying? It's just it's
Yeah,
crazy.
or they're pulling it off Chat GPT, which is okay because it is, they're pulling that from some authentic, credible
Yeah,
resources. But at the end of the day, you know, I put my I I put my weight behind someone, without tooting my own horn, who's been in the trenches for 25 years, who has,
Yeah.
I do have the credentials, but I wrote a third book on credentials and how there's so much more behind the letters behind your name in terms of experience and what you do. And like I said, I've been in the trenches as a teacher, as a special education
Yeah.
teacher, principal for 25 years, and I've raised 2 kids. So, when people have a conversation with me about what it's like for kids and what you should be doing, I kind of know. Whereas, some of these people who've never taught in a classroom and experienced what it's
Hmm.
like having 25 diverse kids
Yeah.
in front of them year after year. And every year you get a new group of 25 to 30 diverse kids, and they're basing their expertise on the fact that they've raised a couple of kids, from their white Anglo-Saxon Protestant home. It's hard sometimes because they're not they're not credible.
Yeah,
It's not the
exactly.
big picture, right? Especially when you live in, places like Canada, the United States, where we're true melting pots. Our civilizations here are a melting pot. We're a mixture of hundreds of different countries and ethnicities and cultures, and we're all melting into one to try to be Americans or Canadians. And you can't put your finger on one type of way of being, right? And so I think until you've actually been in the trenches and you have a diverse group of kids in front of you and a diverse group of emotions, you just don't really truly know, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah, that's true though, because you've been there, you've been the front lines, you know what it is. So you
Hmm.
figure they'd listen to you because you have the experience, but God forbid, someone actually knows more than somebody else. And then, it starts that whole, too many chiefs and not enough Indians theory that goes on, and it's just, to me, it doesn't make any sense. It's like with your credentials alone, it's like you have the experience, you've done the grunt work, you've been there, like, you're not just talking out of your own, backside. You're
No.
talking from experience, and that's what I'm saying. That right there to me is like I'm listening to that guy versus, you know,
Yeah.
you know,
And in about an hour and a half, I'm going to be walking into my school because I'm still a principal. I'm going to be walking in there. And I don't have a principal's office. I have a space called a calming space.
yeah,
And because I believe in working, helping kids work through their emotions, because we have to nowadays.
yeah,
And all my day will start with teachers dealing with whatever they're dealing with emotionally, because usually there's some problem I have to solve for them right off the bat as adults, and then it's kids. So that's what I do every single day, is deal with emotional turbulence from adults and kids and parents, and so you get pretty good at it without even thinking about it, right? So, which is, again, going back to the book, is why I needed to write the book, to just kind of get it down and say, here's a little roadmap for teachers and
yeah,
parents, so you
exactly.
can, yeah.
Yeah, that way you could educate more people, and it's more than just you doing it; it's other people doing it as well, and they understand exactly what techniques and different strategies you're using to deal with these things on a daily basis. And it's easier, it's better when it's more voices than versus one voice, and it's great, you're spreading it to everybody so everybody can learn these things, and that way more it's more unified than anything, because if not, it's so hard, with too many voices out there and too many different sources of different things, and it's just I hate social media for that reason. I mean, it's great at some points, but other
Yeah.
times it's just like it's a very toxic thing for kids too. And
Yeah,
I
well, that's true, and that's life. Moderation is the holy grail. It's like, I enjoy a couple beers, I have 12, you don't want to be around me,
exactly, and I'm
right?
saying I
Same
get
thing.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, and it's well, there's so many different ways though, because you got Snapchat and you have all these other different ones, and it's like
Yeah.
having to keep up with all these things because that's where a lot of the bullying happens too. My kid was talking about this boy she had dated, should I say, because she
Yeah.
was still young. They don't know anything about this stuff.
No.
She had questioned her sexuality at one point, so she wasn't sure if she liked guys or girls, and just kind of flirted around with it, and like she'd say things to me, I think, just to see what I'd say. Dad, I like girls. Okay, what is your point? Like,
Hmm.
no offense, I'm not gonna love
Yeah.
you any different. It's not gonna bother me at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I'm not that type of person. It doesn't affect me what you're in. If that's your thing, hey, go for it. More power to you. I'll
Yeah.
support you any way you want. But this boy had got on here Snapchat and started saying these nasty things, and I was like, "Oh, okay. Did you screenshot all this?" No, I got rid of it, and that's the worst part of all. It's like if you screenshot it, I can hold him accountable for it because I can say, "Look,
Yeah.
this is your kid saying these things to her. So what is going on here? And it's like not enough of the parents get involved. And in this, when you go to the school, it's like sometimes you're not getting anywhere. And I did meet one of her principals. He was a single dad, so he understood where I was coming from. The principal I couldn't stand. I didn't like her. And unfortunately,
Yeah.
she was just one of those ones that give everybody a bad rap. But I understood. But this guy, he understood. And I could connect with him because I was like, hey, listen, you're understanding exactly where I'm coming from. I got 3 girls I'm trying to raise, and all 3 of them I've got to deal with all these things that are going on, boys, and
Yeah.
having to explain to her, hey, this is why you can't dress like this, because boys don't think the same way girls do when it comes to that kind of stuff. Like girls are worried about what you're dressed in. Guys have a different mental perspective of that. They're thinking, inappropriate thoughts sometimes. It's just hormones flying around, and having to explain it to her
Yeah.
all. And I'm like, I'm having to learn all these things too. I'm having to learn new things
Yeah.
as I go because my ex wasn't around and stuff like that. And it was just it's just wild, because it's like you think about it when you have the kids, you think everything's gonna plan is, girls be more her
Yeah.
area. I'll back you up. If it's boys, okay, I'll take lead on this. But now I'm having to play both roles. It was like I'm having to learn things I never even thought I did. And at the same time, it's like I have more respect for women too, because now I'm like, I'm having to see what you guys deal with on a
Yeah.
daily basis, whether it be menstruation or, all these emotions, because girls are
Yeah.
more emotional than boys,
Oh
so I'm
yeah.
having to learn
Yeah.
these things as I go. And it's a
Yeah.
learning curve, man.
Yeah,
So,
and could you imagine how much better it would be if you had a school that actually put the work into these boys when they were in kindergarten?
yep.
Because at the end of the day, this boy who is trashing your daughter on Snapchat, he's
Yeah.
dealing with his own stuff. He's got
Yeah.
hurt feelings. He doesn't know how to deal with jealousy. He doesn't know how to deal with envy. He's
Exactly.
probably feeling shameful that he got dumped or whatever's going on. But if this boy in kindergarten learned about these emotions and learned how to deal with them at an early age, he would probably be handling this situation with your daughter a lot differently
Yeah. Exactly.
than he is now, because he's got no training. He's got no, and I'm not excusing his behavior, but at the end of the
No, I
day,
got you.
if these, because I got a son too, right? I have a son and a daughter. So, and at the end of the day, these boys have to learn how to cope and deal with that feeling that they have when they do get dumped, because it is hard finding a girlfriend. It is.
Hmm.
These things are tough, and then your boys, if you get dumped, your boys, they rip you. They take you to task,
That's where I was
and
leading to. I was about to say your homeboys will start
they
giving you
will,
shit. Yeah.
right? So
Oh
what do you
yeah.
do? Yeah, what do you do? You save face by trashing the girl that's there,
Mhm.
right? And
Mhm.
for me, I was pretty lucky because I was the high school principal where my daughter was in high school, and my son was also there, and nobody, pardon my French, fucked with my daughter because the principal was of the school was there and her older brother was there, right? So,
Yeah.
and no, if she did date a boy, they minded their P's and Q's because,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
mafia, the Italian mafia was running the halls. But, that's not what you get, Pete. Like as a
Yeah.
parent, you don't get to walk the halls. You don't get to make sure and protect, right? And at the end of the day, that's why the responsibility, parents have a big responsibility to teach those things to their kids too, but they don't know how. Parents
Exactly.
didn't, if a parent reads a book on emotions, they're not going to get it as much as they should, because they're not living it like a teacher is or a principal is. That's why I'm sorry about having that one principal who didn't get it, because when you're in the trenches, you see that these boys need training. They need to learn how to deal with their emotions. They need to learn how to do the right thing,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And unfortunately, they get to a point, if they haven't learned how to do the right thing, and if they don't understand empathy and compassion and kindness, when they get their feelings hurt or they get stepped on, they're going to react in a very crass and negative way. And girls do too, right?
Oh
Girls,
yeah,
girls,
girls are
girls do
worse.
too, right? And
Girls, I'd say, are worse if you think about
oh
it.
yeah,
Like when you said Mean Girls, it's funny you say it because I had a little podcast I did before I changed to Pete versus Anxiety. We had talked about that. I called one episode the Mean Girl Effect, and I was talking about that situation right there because it was like they get into such like catty like arguments
mhm.
about this. It's the craziest thing ever
Fluffy
because
sweaters,
they just keep
right?
going back and forth, and it's like a game of pong. It's just going high speed because they're going
Hmm.
back and forth the whole time, and it's just like, oh, that's my friend. That's not my friend. That's not my friend. I'm like,
Yeah,
y'all are making my head turn here. Like, what?
Well,
Well, I'm
try
not
and
friends
try
with this
and
person
try
anymore.
being a principal when the moms get involved.
Oh
And
God.
it's not so much the dads. Dads are pretty good, right? Like they'll come in and they'll say, "Cut that shit out," and there's a tough line there. But moms come in and all of a sudden, it adds another layer because they're emotional too, right?
Yeah.
And that's why it's again, I try to work with parents as much as I possibly can. And whenever I have had to deal with girl drama when I was in middle school and high school principal, I would have to have sessions with moms on an individual basis to say, okay, here's what's happening. This is what I need you to know. You can't be pointing a finger because both girls have played a part, and I need you not to play a part. And I need you to look at the emotional piece here and look at it's about conflict. It's about how they're feeling and how they're reacting to their feelings, just like you're doing. And so as a principal, I tried to teach parents as much as I could about emotional intelligence,
Yeah.
right? And it helped. It did help. It calmed the waters, and it did a lot. But for some, it just doesn't, because they're too invested into drama and their own mental health issues, right? And yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the crazy part too, because then with especially the anxiety, and then with the depression thing with kids too, and it's like they
Mhm.
don't understand what's happening. And it's like this is new feeling for a lot of them at this point. They're like, oh, whoa, what is this feeling like I'm having? Like I'm feeling like my feelings are going to overdrive, and my
Yeah.
brain is just kicking into hyperdrive, and it's
And they don't know what to
and
do with them.
exactly. And that's why I,
Right?
I say that, we need to start with the kids like you're doing. It's like you need to start younger, because we've got to teach them now. Hey, these are the things you need to start being aware of. Like if these things start happening, you need to let someone know, so someone can helping you, because when those start taking off like 1,000 miles an hour, because my anxiety's bad now. Like there's some days I'm just a mess, like and there's other days my depression kicks in, and I'm just like I don't even want to get out of bed half the time, and it's just like I just feel down, and it's just like I can only
Yeah.
imagine a kid at that age. You're still trying to figure out all your emotions, and your hormones are starting to pick up,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and then the drama would tell the kids in school, oh, well, these friends don't like me, or this clique doesn't like me, and it's
Yeah.
just like, guy, can we stop already? This is insane.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like look at the bigger picture, like 10 years down the road, like how stupid this looks. Like you're gonna look back at this and go, yeah, this was just stupid. Like, it's like we should have done it way differently, but it's like,
Well, and I'm trying, and that's what my job is, right, Pete? Is I'm trying. Like I
yeah.
have tools to run, but I have my consulting business, and for the last 10 years, I've been doing workshops and professional development, and doing podcasts now, writing books, trying to do my part. Because one thing that I find with the public and with teachers is that they have to remember that, it's called public education. So if you
Hmm.
think of a kid who comes in, because there are kids who deal with, bouts of depression, and then there's
Hmm.
kids who are physiologically depressed. They have a
Yeah.
chemical imbalance. They're going to need medication for the whole life because their body isn't producing the right chemicals so they can
Yeah.
stay balanced, right? And so there's environmental factors that go involved, and there's physiological factors that are involved. But on top of it, these kids are in a public education facility, which means in a classroom there's 25 to 30 other kids looking at them if they respond to a teacher.
Yeah.
25 other
Exactly.
30 kids looking at them if they go sharpen a pencil, or if they go ask to go to the bathroom, or if
Yep.
they trip in class, or if their shoes untied, or their fly is down, or if their hair isn't done nicely, or there's so many things. And these kids are exposed publicly more than anyone is. Like you and I could go to work and we could get in our cubicle and nobody gets to see that we forgot to brush our teeth that day, right? Or forgot to put deodorant on. These poor kids, they live in a world where everyone notices. So you throw those environmental pressures on top of physiological pressures, and then
Hmm.
you throw in, parents not knowing how to teach this generation of kids how to cope, and
Yeah.
schools still wanting assessments and literacy and numeracy and all this instead of teaching emotional intelligence. And it's a perfect storm, and that's what we're seeing, right? And a lot of it's tied into play. As a youngster, we used to have to go outside and play, and when our
Hmm.
parents were there, we had to solve conflicts. We had to persevere and grit and do. So we naturally developed characteristics to be tougher.
Yeah.
But kids don't play as much, so they're not interacting as humans as much. They're not developing those mental strengths that we did naturally, drinking out of a garden hose, or not wearing a helmet riding our bikes, or
Yeah.
so those are things that this generation of kids, don't get to grow up in an environment that teaches them naturally to be mentally and physically stronger than it was 30 years ago, 25 years ago, 20 years ago. And now because of technology and gaming systems and both parents having to work, as inflation around the world is just, gone crazy with COVID
Yeah.
and stuff. And, it's a perfect storm of why I'm like, I got to write this book, because it's a mess out there. Right.
Yeah, because you also got to remember that with social media too, when they notice those things, it's, oh, look, did you notice what so and so did? Snapchat. Oh, we're going to send Snap about this person, take a picture of them. And you don't realize that's what they're doing, is they're taking the picture, and then the picture spreads at a magnified rate, and not to mention all the eyes. Now you've got like thousands of eyes that are seeing this whole thing as it goes, and
Very
it just
public.
magnifies. And it's just like,
Yeah.
it's just like, it blows your mind, because it's like, it with all the different access to all the internet and things like that, it's just like, it's so much worse, because now they're just sending it to everybody. And now it's not just kids, it's random strangers who get their excitement off to just pick on other people and troll people, and it's just crazy.
It's public, man, and that's the point. It's public.
I know,
when we were
it's
kids,
just,
we had the rotary phone. Like, I remember one time, and this is the craziest thing. I remember being in grade 6 and going to PE class, and we got changed and everything like that, and went into PE, and then I got back to class, and for some reason I got carried away with my buddies, and I go back into class, and my teacher leans over and he says, "Leroy," and I said, "Yeah." He goes, "What did you forget?" And I go, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Look down." I look down. I came back to class in my underwear and my t-shirt. I forgot to put my pants on. Right. And so I got teased, of course. My buddies are like, and he kind of shielded me to get out. But, nowadays, if that happened to a kid, I would have been all over Snapchat. I would have probably went viral. Right. And could you imagine how much humiliation I would have felt, and rightfully, like my buddies, of course, they were all over that, and I got teased at and laughed at. But I was also one of those kids that I didn't grow up dealing with anxiety like you did, Pete, and stuff. So I was able to, water off a duck's back. And, if I needed to, like, I was a bit of a scrapper back in the day. So if I needed to stand up for myself, I would. People knew that, so I could protect myself. But, nowadays, if a kid, if they blow their nose and they have a booger hanging off their cheek, which happens all the time, the amount of Kleenex I go through helping kids wipe their nose, like, all it takes is one kid to whip out their phone and grab that booger on that kid's face, and boom.
Yeah.
Look at booger face. And now that's public. That's thousands of people going to see booger face now, instead of his little circle of buddies that are giving him a hard time. Right. So that's the difference. And you're nailing it. It's just, our kids have so many more pressures, and they're not equipped to deal with it. And that's where, like I said, where my job is to try to help schools, help school district, help parents, help families learn how to, teach their kids how to cope with these stressors, so they don't, end up going down a bad path where they're shooting up schools, committing suicide, getting into drugs and alcohol, that kind of a thing. Because
it's funny you say the school shooting thing, though. Remember the one I don't know if you heard about the one in Tennessee where the parents bought the kid the gun?
Yeah.
Which blows my mind. It's like, you're the parents. Use some common sense. This kid has no good intention.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, well, I bought it anyways. And it's like,
yeah, they were warned like 6 months earlier, right? Like, and it's interesting because
like,
in Canada, we have way different gun laws than you do, right? But I can tell you, in every single one of our homes, there's a rifle, because we hunt, right? Like, even at my school, we have a hunting camp. We take kids out for 3 days. They go and they shoot deer, and there's still even some, because I work for an Indigenous school, and there's still a trap line, and but the difference is everybody has to be registered. Everybody has to go through a background check, psych tech. So the people that have guns are okay to have guns, and they have to be locked in a cabinet and yada yada, right? And so when I heard that story, I'm just like, come on.
Exactly. I was like,
that's just plain. And I think those parents get charged, and aren't they in jail? I hope they are.
It's about time. Yeah. It's about the whole point was, it's about time that someone had finally started taking action against the parents, allowing this to happen.
Yeah.
It's like, you bought this gun for this kid knowing he had bad intentions. And given all the other things that have been going on, you just choose to neglect the fact that he has no good intentions of what he's about to do with this, and you give it to him anyways, and then he goes and does what he does, and it's like, you just think you're not going to get held accountable. It's like,
They're
Come on,
culpable.
man.
Yeah, they're
It's
culpable.
crazy.
What they should have did is they should have went, holy man, as soon as the first warning. And again, this falls on not just the parents, right? I mean, these parents, they screwed up, but when they were warned by the school and warned by the police that this kid had violent tendencies, who stepped in to say, hey, here's the services that you can call for your kid. Here's
Exactly.
what we can do. Here's what we can do. They left it. They
Yeah.
left it for these parents who were not obviously capable
Yeah.
of parenting properly. And so it's, the parents have screwed up completely, having doing and being in this situation, but the system itself, is also flawed, because where was the intervention to help that family, help that kid?
Exactly.
And maybe it was there, but how was it structured? How did it work? And and again, not to beat up on the states, but this is part of the problem where there's this anti-socialist movement down there. But socialism is about saving lives. It's about jumping in and helping a kid. But if they need counseling, find a freaking counseling before he goes and gets a gun and shoots
That's the
people up.
problem with the states. I could tell you right now, is mental health access is just ridiculously terrible.
Yeah.
Everybody tells you, everybody will say it to you. I can tell you, it's just horrible. It's like it's hard to get these things, and it's funny we were talking about that too, because I'm a part of a nonprofit called Podcast for Preventions, and the whole idea is we're trying to raise suicide awareness on top of trying to get programs for mental health. Like have different speakers go out and talk to these people and talk to these kids and trying to start educating them that, hey, we need to start handling these problems now. Like,
Yeah.
Like what is going to be enough is enough. It's like, and people don't have access to resources. It's crazy that that we have all these problems, but we're yet to address the issue, and it continues to be a problem. And it's like, okay, so when is it going to be enough for you all to start doing something? Like you're all worried about everything else but the problem we're having at hand. It's like, like these kids are shooting up schools at an alarming rate. We're looking like a mockery at this point because you're allowing this kind of things to happen. And everybody's like, oh, it's gun control. It's how about let's look at the root of the problem, which is these children's.
Yeah, it's so deep. And Pete, if you ever needed me to come down and speak, I'd give you a huge discounted rate to come down and work with you for sure.
Heck yeah.
I'd even throw out giving you just pay for my expenses, and I wouldn't even charge. I would just come down and help. Because this is the plight for me, right? Is I've got teenagers. I've watched my daughter not want to come out of her room for a week because of what's going on, and but my kids are lucky. I'm an expert in this, and being a principal and stuff, but 99% of families don't have a principal living in their home. They don't have somebody who writes books on this. They don't have the right resources. But there is a way of doing it. There is a way to work with families to give them some basic stuff. And that's what I do, right? That's where I come in and say, okay, here's what you can recognize. Here's how you can build that intrinsic motivation. Here's how you can tap into passions. Here's how you can develop grit and resilience. Here's how you can teach this self-soothing strategies. Actually, my second book is a book on 50 breathing strategies, because it starts there with a kid is feeling those emotions. If they can calm themselves in that moment and just enough to go and say, I need help. There you go. You've won a huge part of the battle, because right now kids can't even calm to the point where saying, I need help, or parents calming to the point of saying, oh, I got to help my kid. Right. And so it really goes down to that fundamental level of just being able to soothe your mind enough to say, holy, something's not right. Please, like, the guy that you were talking about earlier before we got on here, my guess is if somebody would intervene with him when he was 5 about how to cope with the stress that he's dealing with, he wouldn't be sitting on the edge of his bed with a gun. Right. And so that's what I try to do, is I try to tackle this from a proactive lens where I can consult with parents and teachers and school districts to just do the right thing around emotional intelligence, so that kids have the opportunity when they feel that stress to just ask for help, get help, and parents do the same thing, right? It's really that basic, fundamentally, it's really that basic. But by basic, it means 3, 4, 5 years old. That's where it starts.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the hardest part is asking for help. Is the main problem I see that issue is that people don't know how to ask for help, because when they ask for help, then they feel vulnerable. And the same thing with mental health things. It's like when you ask somebody what they think about it, most people will tell you, like, if you tell somebody you're in therapy, they think you're crazy. And I'm like, guys, it don't make you crazy to talk to somebody. Obviously you're experiencing something that you need to get off your chest, or you need somebody to help you understand better. And that's scary that people are dealing with some of these things. And like he was dealing with all that, and he was,
Yeah.
and the crazy thing is that he is actually working towards an app that is supposed to help kids, like teach them like meditation type techniques,
Yeah.
like to release the pressure. And like he
Yeah.
has the best intentions in the world, but he's like the thoughts that he cycles with sometimes are just like
Yeah.
it's crazy. But it leads to the fact that not every, just because people have it all around that is making these monumental things doesn't mean they don't deal with things at the same time. And
Yeah.
it was interesting when he started talking about it though. He just came out of nowhere, and he got real emotional, and you could tell he was upset about the friend. And like, and he, like we were talking, he was like, well, what if I could have done more? And it's like, honestly, you don't know that though. Like he's having
No.
like survivor's guilt basically, because he feels guilty that he could have done more to help the friend. I'm like, but you don't know what that friend was thinking though, and that's the
Yeah.
crazy part. But had they started at a young age, the outcome may have been a way different story at that point,
Yeah. I'll tell you a story, Pete. So this happened this week. So we're in Canada. Well, you're in Kansas City. So are you in Kansas City, or are you just
No,
a
I'm,
Chiefs
I'm
fan?
from I'm actually from Texas. I've actually visited Canada before. I had relatives that live in Thunder Bay right there, right across where.
Oh, okay.
So I've been to
Okay.
Canada itself. It's a beautiful area to been in. I
Yeah.
love it.
So we're dealing with snow right now, right? And so
Hmm.
some of our biggest conflicts revolve around a kid building a snowman, another kid tackles it, and then they're mad because they wrecked my. So I got these two little guys. They're in grade 1. Okay. One kid's over there and he's building this little snowman, and another kid comes over and he keeps kicking it over. And the kid's using his words, because we teach communication. Please stop, please stop. Kid doesn't stop. So the kid grabs a snowball, happens to be an icy one, throws that
Hmm.
kid, hits him in the eyeball. Kid's got a shiner, whatever, karma. You kind of got what you deserved, kid. But anyways, I bring both kids in, and these kids are 6 years old, grade 1. And because we've been training them since they're in kindergarten, and I said, okay, tell me what you would do differently. And both of them went, breathe. And I said, well, why would you breathe? They said, because if we breathe, and they say it in their, and they're not there. They know the talk. They're not
Hmm.
walking the walk yet. But the fact that 6 years old, they know to say, if we would have breathed, then my brain would work and I would be able to do the right thing. That's the language that I got in my school, because we've started this with these kids when they're 4 or 5 years old. Now, these kids, by the time they're in grade 2 and grade 3, guess what? They will breathe. They will deal with that conflict better, and there'll be no snowball in the face. And that's a small little story about how emotional intelligence works, but it works. It
Hmm.
works. And when you have 6-year-olds who can say, I need to stop and take a deep breath to calm my brain so I can do the right thing instead of reacting with violence or aggression or whatever emotion, you're on the right path as a school. And in my
Exactly.
school, the kindergarten teachers and the grade 1 teachers have it the toughest, because their kids are still reacting emotionally. But I don't deal with discipline in grade 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, because my kids can do the right thing because they're emotionally intelligent. I rarely deal with any kind of behavior issues. I mean, I run into the odd thing where kids are on the basketball court, it gets heated, might be a
Yeah.
scrap. But
Yeah.
you know what? That happens. Or
Yeah.
you know
Sportsmanship. Yeah, I get that
that kind
completely.
of stuff. But it's rare. I rarely have kids, or I'll deal with the kid who will, try to skip out of class to go visit their boyfriend or do something like that. But even
Yeah.
then, I will say the conversation that we have revolves around emotional intelligence. It's like, okay, is that the right or the wrong thing? They'll say it's the wrong thing. And I'm like, well, what should have you done? And they'll say, I should have taken some deep breaths so that I could have thought about what I was about to do, because I know it was wrong, so that next time I can make sure my thinking is in charge.
Yeah.
And so the
Exactly.
fact that they're having those thoughts in their head at grade 6, grade 7, that means when they're grade 11, grade 12, they're going to say, I'm not going to smoke that joint. I'm not going to have that extra beer. I'm not going to get in that car with that drunk driver, because they'll be able to calm and think. And that's what happens when you're proactive with emotional intelligence, social emotional learning from an early age. And that's what I do, Pete. That's what I do. And could you imagine if the entire system across the whole world ran a system like that, where they
Yeah.
taught this? We would have more scientists and more breakthroughs on cancer research. We'd have more unbelievable business leaders than you can possibly imagine, because you'd have people who are emotionally intelligent developing at an early age, which is what they do in Finland, which is what they do in Japan, and it is what we're starting to do here in British Columbia. And it's why those education systems are ranked 1, 2 in the world. BC, where my provinces were either ranked 3 through 6 most years, because we develop those emotional intelligence
Yeah,
skills, which leads to huge academic performance. The problem is the powers that be. You know, you look at that guy in Oklahoma who's hawking all those Bibles and do like they're last in the United States in education. They have no concept of what it means to be emotionally intelligent,
exactly.
right?
No,
And
exactly.
that's where you get ahead of anxiety. That's where you get ahead of depression. That's where you get ahead of that stuff. And then when you get ahead of that, those kids who have it physiologically and who do need the support with medication will get it, but they can still cope with the public environmental piece, right? So,
Yeah,
holy, I went on
exactly.
a rant there, buddy.
But that would make sense though. I mean, you're not saying anything
Mm-hmm.
wrong in that rant though. You're saying everything right though, because these kids that are starting at a young age are already knowing to, hey, take a brief breath and let's think about this situation and the outcome of what I should have done versus what I did. And I use the same principle now. It's like I think about it when people start trying to get aggressive with me, I'm like thinking, what is the outcome I'm going to get out of this? Nothing. And I wish I would have known this way younger too,
Mm-hmm.
because like I was abandoned when I was younger too. And I think a lot of my rage issues had to do with just that, like trying to figure out like why this person that gave you life decided to just do what they did. And it's like,
Yeah.
how do you forgive them for that? And a lot of the times, now it's like now I'm older, I'm wiser, and I try to teach my kids the same thing. When I told them, I was like, just remember the last thing you say to somebody could be the last thing they ever hear. It's like, keep that in mind when you're talking to people. Like, don't sit there and say nasty things to people. I understand we all get heated and everything else, and then and you get on the internet and all these people start saying things, and I simulated what it's like to be on the internet, man. I was like, I ran it hard on them just to say, listen, this is what you'll deal with some of these people. You don't have to respond to them. There's a mute the button, mute them, and just go on with your day. You don't have
Yeah.
to respond to them. And, think about what you're doing before you do it. And now I have a 4-year-old that I deal with now because my wife, when we got married, she already had one. She had a younger daughter, and it's like now it's like I'm trying to do better because I know she leads by example. So instead of getting so angry about everything like I used to do, I stop, I think about it, and it's all new to me because I'm not like I'm learning new things from her too because like I'm not really I'm not a really physical, affectionate person with little kids. Like certain things are just weird to me because I've just was
Yeah.
never raised like that. So with her, it's a little
Right.
different, and I'm learning like all new things with her, and it's great because it's she's I get to teach her things and she teaching me things, and then
Exactly.
she sees
Balance.
that, yeah, and she sees that I'm not quick to jump on things, and if I get upset, I'll walk away, and I
Yeah.
avoid the situation and stuff like that, which things I wish I would have known a lot sooner.
Like if
um
you were in kindergarten learning that from a teacher,
Exactly, and that's what
right?
Brian was talking about. He was talking about somebody's developing this app. So maybe I'll definitely have to get you guys linked up. Have to give him your email, have him
Sure.
reach out because maybe you can give him some tips and see what he's got going and see what you can add to it. Because I think the two of you guys together, you guys may be able to do some real things happen. Because he's trying to
Sure.
push for kindergarten. It's actually what he's starting with, and the way his app works is it's like, hey, 15 minutes a day, just go through these things, and the way it applies to little kids, it's like maybe you can give him something he doesn't know because
Well, you know
I'm
what he'd have to do if he spent $20 on my breathing strategies book. That would be his whole app, because that's all it is.
really,
It's mindfulness and breathing strategies because it works.
yeah.
It works. It works.
What's the name of that book again?
It's called And Breathe.
And breathe. Okay, I'll have to tell
Yeah.
him about it for sure. Like I said, though, I'll let him know about it for sure. I'll tell him he has to check this out because it's not like I said. You were not a ranch. You were just saying nothing but the truth. It's like this. Look at it. It's working. You got 6-year-old kids saying I should have breathed and thought about
Every
what I was
day.
going to do. That's what I'm saying. It's like it's hard to argue with facts, and everybody's in a show me kind of state now. It's like okay, well here you go. Look, 2 6-year-olds have a
Yeah.
conflict. Instead of them just fighting it out, they're like, okay, well, we should have thought about this before we did it. And it's like
Yeah.
you can't
Yeah.
argue that point. I mean,
You can't. And when I have a kid who because I have this yo-yo effect with my staff because I'm in a calming space. So when kids are dysregulated, they come out of class and they come to me in the calming space and we work through it. And I always ask them, I'll say, what happened? And the first thing out of their mouth, 9 times out of 10, is I didn't breathe
exactly.
at 5 years old.
That's what I'm saying,
What
though.
what
It's
does that
amazing.
freaking tell you, right? Exactly. On a short note, I've got to kind of get moving here, Pete, because
All right, bud, we can enter right here. It's okay. Did you want to
yeah,
plug any socials for them to check you out? I know you have a website, right?
Yeah, LeroySlanzi.com. They can email me at LeroySlanzi@gmail.com. I'm on LinkedIn. I have a YouTube channel. If they Google Leroy Slanzi, they'll find me out there. That would be great.
Definitely. And always, guys, you know where to find me. I'm on pretty much everything you want me to be on, YouTube, everything like that. I do a live show on YouTube in case you ever get a chance to check it out.
Sure. Okay.
I'll definitely check yours out for sure. And we'll go ahead and wrap up, guys. We're going to wrap up this episode of Pete versus Anxiety, the bonus episode. Leroy, I really appreciate it coming, man. I'd love to keep in touch with you. Let me know
Yeah.
how. I love it, man. I'm gonna have to check out the book myself because I think it got a lot of stuff I want to learn from there. So I'm excited.
Awesome, man. Yeah, and like I said, Pete, look me up, and like I said, I'll
Mm-hmm.
give you a discount to come and work with your people down there, no problem. Because for me, it's about changing the world, right?
I agree. I definitely agree.
Absolutely.
All right, buddy. Well, I'm going to let you go, guys. And this is Pete for Anxiety sign up saying, guys, don't ask how you're doing today. Ask how your mental health is today. We'll see you next time.